So, Simpiwe, how can you make life better for our children, especially after a separation, after a divorce as well?
Basically, after a divorce, we need to, as parents, enter into an agreement of how are we going to raise our children. If we are still struggling with our own personal issues, we need to create an avenue to deal with that. We need to consult professionals and deal with that problem. But parenting has to ensue, has to continue. The interest must be on the well-being of the children. Now, normally we'll struggle as parents because we still have that baggage that coming from the heaviness of whatever happened, whatever caused our breakup. We have to be mature enough to deal with that, separate from raising a child.
Now, speaking about that, how can we boost our children's self-esteem or their sense of security, especially in a developing situation like that where both parents have split?
Like I already mentioned, I think what's important is that we have to formalize it. Because if we don't formalize it, we will bring our issues into the process of raising a child, which is going to affect the child. Remember, us as parents, how we relate to our children, we need to create that balance that is needed for the well-being of the child, for the resilience of the child to be created, to ensue. If we are busy concerned about each other's problems and fighting in front of the children, that's going to affect our ability to focus on what is needed, on the needs of the child. We have to create an environment that is necessary for the development, for the child development.
And what do you say to parents who ask themselves questions such as, I mean, will my children respect me when they're adults, especially depending on the way that we handled our separation and raising those kids?
I get this a lot. Children will respect you when they value your input as a parent. I said to you earlier on that the development, the successful development of a child comes from them internalizing your strength as a parent, your strength as a father, and internalizing your strength as your mother. And then that will create balance within them, which will foster a resilience. The resilience that is necessary for them to withstand the pressures of the world, to develop their ego, their self-identity, who they are, and that is going to help them be able to achieve what they need to achieve in life. Without that, we see problems. We see, someone once said that if we want to change the world, take care of our children. Let's take care of our children. By that, it's promotion and prevention of overcrowding in prisons, mental health institutions, suicidality. I can go on and on. But the most important thing, to answer a question, your respect, you'll earn your respect from your child, but by the input that you've made. The children are very sensitive, and they will remember.
There are some situations that you absolutely can avoid. You cannot avoid, I beg your pardon, but there are some instances where you can avoid a situation. But what we do, because we're people who are driven by looks sometimes and don't even investigate beyond. So you meet Simpiwe and he's your tall, dark and handsome, and you meet Olerato and she's everything that you think you want from a woman. The two of you get together, but you're from two different backgrounds. You don't even know what this other person is dealing with. Here comes a child. But when something goes wrong, you don't know how to even put your differences aside. In an instance where people are not able to access a clinical psychologist like yourself, there are people, as Lalini, there are people who are also not exposed, who don't know that you can seek help in order to be able to co-parent. How do we reach those people? I'm
glad that you brought the question of people from remote areas. People always think that psychology is more westernized and all that. I always say that psychology is African, that has been taken from Africa and polished and sold back to us. But that's a question for that's a topic for another day. Right. We have within our own communities structures that are therapeutic. We have elders, we have religious centers, we have community-based centers, we have traditional healers, we have traditional leaders who are spiritual and inspired, that we can utilize for wisdom of that kind. And I always say to people when they bring that question, what about me? I come from the remote area. We don't have psychologists, but we have therapeutic centers, and this is the topic that we need to take out there, so that people don't think that psychology, you have to go to a city to see a psychologist. Therapy happens. It happens not necessarily because it has to come from a formal psychologist. It can happen from someone who is inspired, who's spiritually inspired, that can bring about that necessary change in your life.
What is healthy co-parenting? What is unhealthy co-parenting, maybe?
Let me start with unhealthy co-parenting. Unhealthy co-parenting is the one whereby a parent sublimate. That's a psychological term. That means that they take their own issues and use their own issues to raise a child. Like, for example, things that you shouldn't do, like using a child to pass a message to their mother or to their father. Tell your father, tell your mother, tell your father that you need shoes. Tell your father that you need a bag for school. What are you doing?
Right.
Parents usually make that mistake of communicating their own issues through the children, which when they do that, they don't see the damage they're causing. It affects the child. It affects the child's well-being. The child grows up lacking balance. The child grows up lacking resilience and being prone to a lot of problems at a later stage. That is unhealthy. A healthy parenting is the one that focuses on the development and the well-being of the child. That's why I said that it must be formalized. We must work on schedule. Mostly if we are divorced, then maybe we're seeing other people. First of all, you have to get a buy-in from whoever you are with at this moment, who is not the biological parent of that child. Get a buy-in from them. Get them to ask to support you. If you get that support from them, then you'll be able to focus on the child. And it must be formal. There must be schedule. If I'm picking the child up at 8 a.m. to take them to school, I'm dropping them off. You pick them up at 4 o'clock. There's a formal schedule. It has nothing to do with me and you being personal. And we should avoid, minimize at all costs personal interaction between the people who are involved in co-parenting.
So, Simpiwe, what do you say to parents who are caught in an ugly spat with each other, with parents who are caught in a volatile situation between them, and in instances, especially where men aren't allowed to see their children? What recourse can one seek in that kind of situation?
Unfortunately, it's a sad situation whereby someone has to involve the legal process in that instance. I would advocate for intervention, try to get some kind of mediation for someone to foster some sense between us. But if that fails, then you have no choice. Your recourse is to seek legal counsel, whereby, like I said earlier on, it has to be formalized. Because if it's formalized and we communicate through written means, then we have an avenue to communicate rather than relying on the personal interaction, because personal interaction most of the time, like you said, they fail because people are still investing emotionally.
And what impact does that kind of situation have on the children? are we seeing more instances where we are burdening children with, would you say, adult-like responsibilities, where they'd have to watch out for one parent or the other based on the volatility between both parents?
Absolutely. What happens is that I always say that when people lack insight, problems ensue. An intervention with a psychologist will create insight on these two parents. Most of the time when I do that, I get parents who would say, oh, all this time I didn't see that I was actually damaging my child, because they didn't have insight. They were too much involved, absorbed in their own issues, such that they don't see the impact that they are causing on the child. So they need to get intervention that's going to create that kind of insight. For as long as they don't seek that intervention, they will continue affecting and abusing
But very quickly for us, in an instance where you have to force someone to be there for their child, so you're not even looking for maintenance, you're just like, come see your child, even if it's just to spend a day, take him to the park, where you find an instant the child is like looking through the window, Upu baba, utini.
I'm glad that you're asking that. I've been involved in situations in another country where it was very formal. It was enforced. It was enforced by the law. You have to do 1, 2, 3, or else the law kicks in. So that works in most communities, and I think it can work in a lot of communities, because basically what is important is the interest, is the well-being of the child. Because remember, the child is the if for lack of a better word, is the property of the state. And if anything happens to the child at a later stage is going to be the burden to the state. That is the approach. And because the progressive communities understand that, they will put these measures in place that you have to be there. Because now, if you're not there, this child's going to be a burden to us in terms of mental health and also in terms of correctional services.
Right.
We don't want to see that at a later stage, because that's just a no-brainer.
Right, right.
You don't take care of them, they'll end up in the system.
Unfortunately, Simpiwe, thank you very much for coming through and helping us make sense of this issue. Clinical psychologist Simpiwe Sikonye, thank you very much for your time.